This is WFYI News Now. It's March 17th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, a new analysis underscores the impact funding for the National Institutes of Health has on state economies. The Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus pushes back against a wave of anti-immigration legislation. A housing report from Prosperity, Indiana highlights what low-income renters face. And Marion County residents can look forward to universal curbside recycling.
We need to make sure that residents understand, hey, there's going to be a second cart arriving at your house. This is how it should be used. This is how it should not be used.
Those stories coming up. But first, United Auto Workers Union members at Rolls-Royce in Indianapolis overwhelmingly approved a new contract last week. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Tamoria Cunningham reports the agreement covers hundreds of workers who build aircraft engines for U.S. government contracts.
The new 5-year contract increases wages and rolls cost of living adjustments into the base pay for all employees. It also ends a tiered pay system for workers. Sherry Webster makes aircraft engine parts for Rolls-Royce. She says union members demanded to end the wage tier structure during the bargaining process.
It'll bring people together more because it's difficult when you're working next to a person and you know that they're making more money than you are doing the same job.
Employees will receive double-digit pay increases over the course of the contract. Union members will also see improved retirement benefits. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Tamoria Cunningham.
A new analysis underscores the impact funding for the National Institutes of Health has on state economies. WFYI's Ben Thorpe reports the analysis comes as President Trump has proposed broad changes and cuts to NIH funding.
The analysis is done by United for Medical Research, a coalition of research institutions and healthcare advocates. It found that NIH funding had supported nearly $800 billion in economic activity over the past decade across the country. In Indiana, the coalition found that more than $400 million in NIH funding awarded to researchers last year supported over 5,000 jobs. The group said in a statement that the administration's proposals would lead to a reduction in research and clinical trials. But the Trump administration says the cuts are an effort to force academic institutions to reduce bloat and could ultimately help fund more research in the long term. Trump's proposed changes to NIH funding are currently being fought in U.S. courts. It's not clear when they may be resolved. I'm Ben Thorpe.
Members of the Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus gathered at the State House last week to push back against a wave of anti-immigration legislation. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Lauren Chapman reports lawmakers and advocates say the nearly 20 proposed measures make Indiana hostile to immigrants who have invested in the state.
Representative Victoria Garcia Wilburn says, while most of the bills aren't moving forward, the proposed measures are not Hoosier hospitality.
This is really not a question of legal and illegal. This is about the climate that we're creating here in Indiana.
That climate hits close to home for Ashley Caceres. She's the executive director of Su Casa, a nonprofit for Latino Hoosiers. In 2020, it expanded into Seymour, which gained national attention for anti-immigrant sentiment.
It's just very easy to give this idea of a community to blame for a lot of very hard and complex societal issues.
5 of the measures flagged by the caucus are still moving forward in the legislature. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Lauren Chapman.
For every 100 extremely low-income renters in Indiana, there are only 38 affordable and available housing options. That's according to a new report released by Prosperity, Indiana. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Tamoria Cunningham explains advocates want legislators to prioritize solutions.
Nationally, more than a third of extremely low-income renters work. Another third are seniors. Many others have a disability, are students, or caregivers. People who struggle to pay rent also tend to have trouble paying for other basic necessities. Andrew Bradley is a senior director of policy and strategy with Prosperity, Indiana.
If they have a flat tire or an unexpected cost, then suddenly they're choosing between going to work and making rent, or being able to pay for their children's school supplies and paying rent.
Bradley wants state and federal lawmakers to support targeted investments to increase the supply of affordable housing. And he says Governor Mike Braun should create a commission for housing safety, stability, and affordability. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Tamoria Cunningham.
And for our final story today, Marion County residents can look forward to universal curbside recycling. WFYI's Jill Sheridan reports the long-awaited move is still a few years away.
A new contract deal with Lakeshore Recycling Systems will take over solid waste collections starting next year and phase in universal recycling in 2028. Indianapolis Department of Public Works Deputy Director Natalie Van Dongen says the added time will allow for a comprehensive education campaign.
We need to make sure that residents understand, hey, there's going to be a second cart arriving at your house. This is how it should be used. This is how it should not be used.
Residents will receive recycling bins closer to the start date of the program and may pay for additional carts. Plans include a new processing facility run by Waste Management, one of the previous solid waste vendors. Indianapolis remains one of the only major U.S. cities without a universal curbside recycling program. I'm Jill Sheridan.
And that's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin and Zach Bundy, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.